A good steak can cost a pretty penny, so how do you know you're getting your money's worth? From Tomahawk to Wagyu, these are the pricey cuts of meat you should and shouldn't shell out for. With only 4 locations, including one in New York, Charlie Palmer's Steak is a relatively small player in the steakhouse industry. The Steakhouse features a 32-ounce dry-aged prime porterhouse for 2. According to the restaurant's team, the dry-aged prime porterhouse is always a great option. Unfortunately, many diners disagree, saying that their rendition of the steak was poorly prepared and lacked flavor. One patron of the New York location found their dining experience disappointing, writing on Yelp, "The steak came out room temperature while the sides were piping hot." Meanwhile, another diner in New York complained that their dish was unevenly cooked, saying, "I asked for medium well, and at first I felt that it was my own fault for ordering this temperature so that it came burnt. But the char was thick, and a good part of the steak was undercooked."
This steak is medium rare. I asked for it medium.
Shula's Steakhouse sources its meat from the Graham Angus Farm, which specializes in Angus beef. In fact, the chain claims that its beef is superior to USDA Prime, the highest grade of beef certified by the United States Department of Agriculture. This positions the chain's beef among the top 1% offered in restaurants. Perhaps this is why Shula's steaks are so expensive. One of these is the Cowboy Ribeye. Not every diner is enthusiastic about Shula's Cowboy Ribeye, though. One dissatisfied reviewer wrote on Yelp, "I ordered the 22-ounce Cowboy Ribeye medium well. I was brought a well-done 16-ounce. I know my steaks, and this was not a 22-ounce no matter how it's cooked." Meanwhile, another diner said that while their steak was flavorful and cooked correctly, it was a little tough in texture. Morton's Wagyu Filet has elicited a range of feedback from steak enthusiasts. On the positive side, some diners have praised the cut, calling it delicious and absolutely amazing. However, many others have delved into the less favorable aspects of the dish. One patron wrote on Yelp, "The menu advertises Wagyu Filet Mignon, but their Wagyu wasn't even as good as their regular Filet Mignon. The Wagyu had a slight rubberiness to it even though it was cooked medium rare, whereas the regular Filet Mignon was very tender." Another diner agreed with this assessment, writing, "Morton's Wagyu steak is basically a filet mignon, so you might as well save your money and order a filet instead." If you order the true A5 Kobe beef at Mastro's, you'll be ordering the most expensive type of beef in the world. One of Mastro's chefs explains why the cut is so sought after, saying,
"Only 3,000 head of Kobe cattle are butchered every year, of which only 4,500 pounds comes to America."
Mastro's serves its true A5 Kobe beef broiled and lightly seasoned with black pepper and sea salt to maintain the steak's natural flavor. Considering the cut's steep price tag and mixed reviews, however, we can't say that we can recommend it. While some diners have praised the steak as being one of the best, others haven't been as impressed. For instance, one disappointed customer said on Open Table, "Ordered a $240 A5 Kobe steak. It was mostly fat. I'm not referring to the natural marbling in A5. This was almost all tough pieces of fat, by far the worst A5 I've ever had." The Kagoshima A5 Wagyu New York strip is the most expensive steak on the Palms menu. In spite of the quality of the meat, the steak has received both positive and negative feedback from customers. For instance, some reviewers have used adjectives like great, phenomenal, and amazing to describe the steak. Unfortunately, the story doesn't stop there. On the downside, one disappointed diner wrote on Open Table, "We specifically asked it to be medium cook. It was looking rare cooked, and by the second bite it was cold already. That 8-ounce is not an A5 Wagyu cut. It is more like a piece of fat with less than 10% meat sticking to it." Another diner seconded this assessment, writing, "Worst Wagyu beef I've ever had. The meat was fatty and bright pink. I had ordered medium."
Have you been to Ruth's Chris Steakhouse, home of serious steaks?
Featured in the specialty cuts section of the menu at Ruth's Chris Steakhouse, the Tomahawk Ribeye is a USDA Prime bone-in cut. This 40-ounce steak is known for its distinctive look that echoes a tomahawk. Made with corn-fed Midwestern beef, the ribeye comes with a long Frenched bone that's been meticulously cleaned of meat and fat. Broiled at 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit and served on a sizzling 500-degree plate to maintain the perfect temperature throughout the meal. The dish is garnished with butter and parsley for added flavor. Reactions to the Tomahawk Ribeye at Ruth's Chris have been varied and include both compliments and complaints. In particular, fans of the dish have highlighted that the steak was perfectly cooked, well presented, and delicious. Dissatisfied reviewers, on the other hand, have taken issue with the steak's preparation, with one Redditor complaining that their steak was undercooked. Even more damning, another unimpressed diner posted on TripAdvisor that their Tomahawk Ribeye wasn't a tomahawk at all, saying, "It came with the meat cut off the bone. We asked why, and were told that if we didn't want the meat cut off the bone, we should have told the waiter." Made with USDA prime beef, the prime tomahawk at Fleming's Prime Steakhouse represents the top 2% of all cuts rated by the organization. This 35-ounce cut of beef is seasoned with salt and pepper and seared to create a steak crust. The prime tomahawk is also served on a 350-degree plate to ensure that it keeps an optimal temperature. Customer reactions to the prime tomahawk have ranged from enthusiastic to underwhelmed. Several satisfied reviewers highlight the steak's rich flavor, with one diner writing on Yelp, "It was delicious, well-seasoned, and absolutely juicy." On the other hand, some reviewers have noted issues with the steak's flavor, texture, and portion size. One person wrote on TripAdvisor, "I guess most of that 35-ounce steak was in the bone because the edible portion I'd estimate was barely a pound and was only about 1.25 inches thick and barely warm." Meanwhile, another patron said that their steak was unseasoned and charred, and yet another described it as somewhat chewy.
Interesting texture. It's chewy.
A part of the chef's suggestions portion of the Capital Grille's menu, the Porcini rubbed bone-in ribeye is one of the chain's premier dishes. While the Capital Grille's menu doesn't specify the cut size, we do know that the chain's cuts of beef are dry-aged for 18 to 24 days and cut in-house. One happy customer wrote on OpenTable, "The Porcini rubbed ribeye is probably one of the best steaks ever concocted." Several other patrons echoed this sentiment, describing the dish as delicious, amazing, and incredible. On the downside, the steak has also been criticized for being flavorless, with one diner saying on Yelp, "There was, it seemed like, probably 4 or 5 ounces of fat and chewy gristle. So disappointed." Although still pricey, Steak48's Filet Mignon is decent value for your buck as far as top-range USDA prime tenderloin cuts go. Expertly prepared, the beef is wet-aged for 28 days and hand-cut by the chain's master butchers. Steak48's Filet Mignon is available with a variety of enhancements for an extra cost, including crab cake Oscar and chef-style burrata. Most diners have been pleased with Steak48's Filet Mignon, with a few complaints pertaining to the meat's preparation method rather than its quality. On the positive side, one customer described the dish on TripAdvisor as juicy and delicious, while another called it phenomenal. Yet another enthused reviewer wrote on TripAdvisor, "I've had filet mignon hundreds of times all around the world. This is flat out one of the best. However, the steak may not always arrive at the table cooked to your specifications," as highlighted by one customer who wrote on OpenTable, "I ordered a filet mignon medium well, and it was more than medium well and dry." The team at Del Frisco's describes its Japanese A5 Wagyu steaks as tender with every bite. They also add that the cuts feature exquisite marbling and a buttery texture. Indeed, the chain's Wagyu has stirred mostly positive feedback from customers. Several diners have been highly impressed with the dish, calling it delicious and melt-in-the-mouth tender. One diner wrote on TripAdvisor, "It's an investment, but worth it." But not all customer feedback about the chain's Wagyu has been positive. Some diners call it overpriced. For instance, one diner wrote on TripAdvisor, "For that price, you want it perfect, and sadly, it was cold." Urban Farmer is one of the few steakhouses that offers a steak tasting option on its menu, allowing diners to sample a variety of cuts side by side.
You like steak?
I do.
Customers can try 3 different 6-ounce New York steaks. Matt Christensen, the executive chef at Urban Farmer, praised the concept of steak tasting in an interview with Modern Farmer, saying, "To describe the difference between the qualities of each type of beef always falls short on words. Within a steak tasting, you get the fullness of the description within your mouth on only one visit." The majority of diners agree that the chain's steak tasting menu features high-quality beef and is a great way of comparing the flavors and textures of different types of meat. Perhaps one patron sums this up best, writing on TripAdvisor, "Amazing how 3 steaks can be all amazing and still taste completely different. Melt in your mouth good. What's funny is that each of us had a different favorite of the 3. Another diner also praised the experience, writing on Yelp, "We could definitely taste the differences between the 3 options, and we both ended up preferring the leaner grass-fed beef. All were cooked exactly to our preference." One of the standout features of Smith & Wollensky's swinging Tomahawk Ribeye is its distinctive preparation method. This hefty 44-ounce steak is expertly seared at the table using a high-heat blowtorch. Underneath the steak, a strategically placed bowl of potatoes catches the dripping beef fat to create an exquisite side dish. To say that Smith & Wollensky's swinging Tomahawk Ribeye has been a hit with diners would be an understatement. The chain's patrons rave about the cut's preparation, presentation, and flavor. For instance, one reviewer wrote on Yelp, "The swinging tomahawk and meat fat potatoes is everything. The presentation is amazing. They torch it at the table. I've never seen anything like it." Another diner shared this assessment, writing on TripAdvisor, "It was a pricey evening, but I've always wanted to try a tomahawk, and their version was great. Medium rare as requested, nice bit of charring on the outside, and enough to take home a doggy bag for a beef salad the next day."